speaker is Joshua Moshe, who is an award-winning saxophonist, composer and producer who combines the spiritual essence of nigunim, the improvisational spirit of jazz, and the time-honoured melodies of Jewish songs in celebration of the rich diversity of Jewish culture. I don't think he's playing for us tonight, but I have had the privilege of hearing him, and I strongly suggest you all find out where he's playing next. Joshua's family recently made national news after being the target of antisemitism and boycotting in Thornbury. I'd like to welcome Joshua, who will share his personal journey of Jewish pride and resilience.
Good evening, and thank you for having me. It is an honour to be here speaking on the occasion marking the 30th Yahrzeit of the Rebbe of Righteous Memory. I must be honest though, when I saw a phone call coming from Rabbi Veli, my first thought was, he must be calling me for a gig. Like many musicians, I await the next phone call for the next performance with great anticipation and excitement. Needless to say, I was very surprised to find out he was asking me to attend this event in a very different capacity, as a speaker. A speaker? My first response was to ask the rabbi if he was sure he had the right number, for I'm no great Torah scholar, leader, or yeshiva graduate capable of delivering an insightful drush on the fly. I spend more time than I should admit reading articles on Chabad.org. Am I really the right person to be speaking here on this occasion? Rabbi Veli explained that yes, he did in fact have the right number, and he just wanted me to share a few words on my recent experiences with antisemitism, my journey to Yiddishkeit. I reluctantly agreed, while it started dawning on me that I wouldn't be able to do what I usually do, which is hide behind a saxophone or a clarinet. I'd actually need to be up here and speak. And in order to do this, first, I would have to believe in my own unique strengths and talents as a simple Jew. I would, fittingly indeed, need to draw strength from one of the Rebbe's teachings, that every soul is put on this earth by Hashem to complete a mission, and that every Jew has the potential to fulfill this mission and elevate oneself to lofty heights of exceptional brilliance, even just a simple everyday Jew like myself. Now, I cannot emphasize just how ordinary I am. I was born in South Africa in a secular Jewish home. We had a mezuzah on the front door, but it was just a case. It didn't have a scroll in it. I went to an Orthodox Jewish day school. We davened at a Mezorti shul. We'd have Shabbat dinner on Friday nights, and that was about it as far as my Jewish home life growing up. When I was 8, my family relocated to New Zealand, where the only Jewish school finished at the end of primary due to the shortage of students to sustain a high school. So after Bar Mitzvah, I attended a Presbyterian school where the first thing the enrollment officer said to me was, "Now, I know you're Jewish, but you will not get special treatment here. You are to attend chapel like everyone else, and you are not allowed to wear your kippah." It was in this environment that I was taunted on an almost daily basis for the entirety of high school. From year 7 to 12, I was called Jew boy, insulted with gas chamber jokes. People would throw money at my feet and draw swastikas on my locker. Everyone responds to this sort of treatment differently, but I made the conscious decision to maintain a calm, unaffected outward appearance, whilst hiding the pain I felt on the inside. As a 13-year-old boy, I thought to myself 2 things. 1, I cannot let them see me suffering, because that's what they want. And 2, that if I can just convince them that I'm like them, I'm no different to them, I'm just a normal New Zealand boy, they will stop harassing me. And so I put up with this treatment without making much fuss. I put my kippah away, and I hid in the music department, burying myself in music to cope with this reality. When I finished high school, my family relocated again, and I came to Melbourne to study arts and music at Melbourne and Monash University. Whilst I was proud of my Jewish heritage, I continued the mantra I learned in high school of attempting to fit in, to assimilate, to be normal. I didn't know many people in the community here, and I wasn't living in the area, so I tried to just be accepted and treated in my new identity as jazz musician, to hide any aspect of my Judaism that made anyone too uncomfortable, to be a bagel and lox Jew. Fast forward a few years and I meet my lovely wife, Maggie May. We start a business together and begin building our family. But despite such assimilation efforts, I was never truly comfortable or accepted, and I never felt like I fully fit in. As per the Rebbe's teachings, my soul was calling out for a life of mitzvot and for connection. Try as one might, a Jewish soul can never truly abort this mission. What's even more surprising is that my wife, who was born in Essendon in a non-Jewish atheist home, felt the same. Little did she know at the time that her own fascination with Jewish culture growing up was actually her own neshama calling out for this connection. Anyway, we tried our best to live decent moral lives within the framework of contemporary Australia. For example, we operated our business quite distinctly to the other local gift shops around. In conducting our business, we held ourselves to high ethical standards. We used our business to build community and bring people together. We supported many artists' livelihoods. We were overly generous with our time and resources. We practiced tzedakah, and we constantly worked on self-improvement and being kind and decent people. Even so, our souls called out for more. And as has always been the Jewish way, we accessed knowledge through the written word. First, we started reading more on Jewish history, about Jewish traditions, about my own family's history in Germany, about the deep and complex history of Israel and my family's connection there, about the first temple, Galus, Lashon HaKodesh, Lashon Hara, Sefirot, Yiddish folk songs, Jewish life in Andalusia, so on. We started to invite distant Jewish friends over for Shabbat on a weekly basis, those in the north and a few brave souls who ventured over from the south. We always made the joke that did they bring their passport? One day, a certain Rabbi David Gutnick of East Melbourne Synagogue came to our shop and dropped off Shemura Matzah to ensure we could celebrate Pesach properly. Through this simple act, we developed a relationship and sought out more opportunities to attend services and study. Again, the legacy of the Rebbe lives on in kind and generous souls like David, who facilitated a connection for far-flung Jews in the north, like Maggie and I. One day, we looked at our son and thought about what kind of life we wanted to live as he grows up. We decided to approach Rabbi Gutnick to broach the topic of conversion for Maggie. After the appropriate warning of the challenge ahead of us and a few months of deliberation, we decided to go all in. Over time, we started to transition our lives to Shabbat observance and to kashrut. We decided to move our home south and found a Jewish kindergarten for our son, 3 at the time. However, our trendy and creative Northside gift shop was doing well, and we couldn't take the risk of uprooting and moving it. After all, we were upstanding members of the Northside creative community, so we drove up and down Punt Road every day. Well, every day except for Shabbos. Shabbat, Saturday, historically the busiest day for our shop. It became the day that Maggie and I were not to be contacted by our staff. And this was met with a degree of frustration. Add to this, the customers who used to be delighted to see Maggie every Saturday started asking why she was not around. Maggie started covering her hair. I started wearing a kippah. As much as we were asking questions of God, people began asking questions of us. They would ask, why aren't you sending your son to the local primary school? But why do you suddenly live so far away in the south? Your challah must be nice, but what are your thoughts on the apartheid? One of Maggie's former friends asks her, why are you sending your son to a Jewish school? Is it so that they can indoctrinate him for you? She follows this up with, why are you converting? You know, they are not like us. Such low-lying tension continued for another 18 months until the 7th of October 2023. The barbaric, genocidal actions of Hamas and the worst massacre of Jews in a single day since the Shoah was met with overwhelming silence by the community our shop was in, usually the loudest social activists in the world. And while we struggled to pull ourselves together to show up to work every day, the people we worked with our suppliers, our staff, our customers, first in a trickle and then in a wave, started condemning Israel for genocide before the ground invasion had even began. And since we were a Jewish-owned business, surely we were then responsible for the genocide. We immediately noticed our revenue and shop attendance drop, resulting in the worst December period in 4 years. We made all sorts of excuses to ourselves, but deep down inside we knew why. This was all but confirmed when we witnessed one of our top customers who attended our shop weekly for 5 years suddenly stop coming in. Another one sent us a message to ask, "I've noticed you've not posted about the genocide. As a Jewish-owned business, what is your stance on Palestine? Before I shop with you again, I need to know I'm supporting a business that supports a free Palestine." Such hostility was so prevalent throughout art and music circles in which we were historically enmeshed that I found myself joining a support group for Jewish creatives on WhatsApp. In January, a transcript of the chat was leaked to prominent anti-Zionist activists who identified me as an owner of Think Thornbury. While sharing excerpts of the chat, the activists invented a conspiracy theory involving Maggie, who was not in the group, in some kind of plan to take down prominent anti-Zionists for their advocacy on Palestine. Neither Maggie and I were ever involved in such a plan, but Lashon Hara spreads rapidly, whilst leaving a trail of destruction in its path. Overnight, the 7 years of goodwill and upstanding reputation we had both built in that community was decimated. Former friends ceased speaking to us, staff quit, almost all of our trades ceased, suppliers stopped working with us, local business owners we had known for almost a decade suddenly refused to make eye contact. And worst of all, we became victims of a vitriolic public boycott, harassment and vandalism campaign. Our shop was plastered with boycott stickers picturing the Magen David on the Israeli flag with a cross through it, in a style reminiscent of my German Jewish grandparents' bakery in Berlin in the 1930s. The harassment and abuse got so bad that we resorted to locking the shop door during trading hours and vetting customers before they came in for the fear of our own safety after we had been verbally abused multiple times and received a death threat on our shop phone. We gave notice on our lease and made plans to leave the area as soon as we possibly could. Throughout this experience, I immediately noticed historic parallels, not just to what my grandparents experienced in Germany, but also to what Jews have experienced all over the world for centuries. In the Second Temple period, we were subject to Greek rule in Jerusalem. Officially, the Hellenist Greeks tolerated a degree of Jewish custom in our ancient homeland, but there was underlying tension between the contrasting worldviews and between political factions. This tension simmered for a while until it bubbled over and exploded during a period of political unrest and war in which Antiochus IV, aided by Hellenist Jews, their own version of Jewish anti-Zionists, wrested control of Jerusalem by force, invading and capturing our holy Beit HaMikdash. In the Tanu Rabbanan Maimah on Chanukah, the Rebbe teaches us that the Greeks didn't have a problem with the intellectual study of Torah. They actually recognized the wisdom that the Torah contained, and the Greeks valued intellectual pursuits. They also valued culture and tradition, and so officially had a policy of multiculturalism, liberalism, and democracy. Therefore, they didn't mind bagels and lox Jews, so long as Judaism was purely cultural. So the Greeks were okay with Torah study and the keeping of mitzvot that could be explained through reason, like the prohibition against stealing. However, the Greeks were deeply disturbed with mitzvot that could not be explained through logic or reason, like kashrut. Our response was, well, we keep these mitzvot that can be explained through reason because Hashem said to, and we keep these other mitzvot that cannot be explained through reason because Hashem said to. On a deeper level, the keeping of the illogical mitzvot is a reflection of the holiness of the Jewish people, because holiness is beyond logic. Back then, and still today, many Jews are willing to live lives that, in one sense, are made more difficult because of the observance of mitzvot. It would have been easier for Jews of the Second Temple period to placate the Greeks, accept their puppet appointment of the high priest, and do away with the aspects of their Jewish identity that made the Greeks uncomfortable. Perhaps Antiochus would have spared them lots of death and destruction. Certainly the Hellenizing Jews thought that to be the case. But the major Jewish response to such an affront to our way of life was to double down and respond with pure self-sacrifice and a commitment to Judaism that wasn't based on logic, but one that was based on the feeling that it is impossible for a Jew to live any other way. Where does this feeling come from? The Rebbe teaches us that this connection comes from the essence of the Jewish soul known as the Yechidah. The Yechidah is compared to a single jar of oil which was sealed with the stamp of the Kohen Gadol. Just like the Greeks could defile most of the oil in the Beit HaMikdash, but weren't able to defile that single jar of oil, the Greeks were able to penetrate the Jews' intellect, but weren't able to affect the essence of our soul. And so to fight back, the Jews would need to tap into their Yechidah. Similarly, it would have been simpler for me to continue living a culturally Jewish life in Melbourne's trendy north, rather than the deeper pursuit I now find myself in. On a purely rational level, it made no logical sense for me to pursue a more observant Jewish life. I was a well-established figure in the arts and music world. I had a successful small business. I was an in-demand musician being booked at some of the most prestigious venues and festivals in Australia and in Europe. But the feeling of giving all that up, to refuse to join the anti-Zionist Jews yelling in the street, rationalizing the massacre of our holy brothers and sisters in our ancestral homeland, comes from a deeper place than logic. It comes from my Yechidah. The Maccabees, a tiny rebel force from the tiny province of Judea, stared down the Greeks, an army far more formidable in power, numbers, and territory than them. They didn't have a plan for winning. They just knew that losing was not an option. When the rest of the Jews saw this commitment, they were also inspired to stand strong against all their spiritual challenges, connecting to the feeling deep inside of them that it was impossible to live their lives in any other way. Winning the war against the Greeks with self-sacrifice was a complete and total spiritual victory that defies reason. When we declared an independent state in our Holy Land after almost 2,000 years of exile, that defied reason. When we stared down 8 invading Arab armies under an arms embargo and won, that defied reason. When in April the Islamic Republic launched the largest drone and ballistic missile strike in history with almost no impacts in Israel, that defied reason. The fact that we, the Jewish people, continue to exist and thrive after all the oppression and persecution all over the world for thousands of years defines reason. We are beyond reason because we are holy. Many of us feel real anxiety and stress at this moment. October 7 has cast such a darkness over the world, and the feeling that we are outnumbered and overpowered by this darkness is overwhelming. Know that we have seen this many times before and that we will be okay. Our response to this moment must be like the Maccabees. We must tap into our Yechidah and pursue mitzvot. We should live meaningful lives enriched by Torah. We must double down on our self-sacrifice and efforts to spread light in the face of such darkness, so that we may transform this moment of darkness into holiness, like the Maccabees who wrested back control of our holy temple. The Rebbe explains that the kinnor, the harp in the Beit HaMikdash, had 7 strings, while the harp in the time of Moshiach will be beyond the limits of the natural order and therefore have 8 strings. As a musician, I'm yearning to hear what that 8th note sounds like. May we all be able to hear that 8th note with the coming of the Mashiach, the safe release of our hostages, and the revelation of a new era of peace. Shalom Aleichem.